Yes, welcome back to the Unstuck movement, true testimonies of breakthrough. I am your host, Rob Z, and I love to bring guests on the show who have had incredible breakthroughs in your life to let you know it's possible for you also. Today, we have the powerful Christian Espinosa with us on the podcast. And Christian, I love to jump right out of the gate with a powerful question to get the ball rolling. I'm curious about your book, The In-Between, Life in the Micro, and talking about what the micro is. So what is the micro? What does that mean to you? And how do you practically apply that to your life?
Yeah, so before I dive into what the micro is, I'll explain what the macro is. For high achievers or people like me, I think I'm a high achiever. We tend to get very focused on a big goal, which I call the macro. And often we get so focused, at least I have, that I've ignored things right in front of me. I've let relationships fail, let my health fail because I've been so hyper focused on trying to accomplish this big thing. So the micro is about that balance, like looking at what's right in front of you and showing up with some intention with that. So you're paying attention and you show up with intention. And what I've found is sometimes when you pay attention to the micro moment, you realize like maybe that macro goal you're seeking isn't actually what you want anymore. And it also adds to the fulfillment of your life because I think life is really a collection of those micro moments. And if we get so focused on a macro goal, we often miss out what's right in front of us and we're just chasing one goal after another, which is not very fulfilling.
Yeah, it drives you forward, but it doesn't bring fulfillment. That's really
Yes.
good. I feel compelled to share something right off the bat because I didn't think about this situation in my life as a micro revelation, but it definitely is. I had a dream a few years ago. Somebody who's a high achiever, I'd put myself in that category also. Always looking what's coming up next and not being present. And I had this dream, and in this dream, I was driving over a bridge with my grandmother. She had passed away, and she was holding my hand. She was driving the car, which she never drove, and she was holding my hand in the dream. And I was like a little kid. I was like a little boy. I had like this little 4-year-old hand. And while we're driving, she reaches over and she hugs me. And I'm like yelling, "Graham, you're gonna wreck the car. Keep your eyes on the wheel. Why are you hugging me?" And she said, in the dream, she said, "Don't worry about where we're going. Just love me. Don't worry about where you're going. Just love people." And clearly, I'm a man of faith, and that to me was clearly God speaking to me in the dream that I need to stop worrying so much about where I'm going and what's next, and just enjoy the people around me, and enjoy like what's happening around me, and pay attention to the micro things of life, the things that come at you every single day that are so important, but can be, like you said, things that we just don't even pay any attention to because we're so focused on where we're going and not what we have right now. So I felt compelled to share that, man, because that was like a big lesson for me in my life and something that comes up every day. So I'm curious for you how this comes up every day, and we're going to dive into that deeper. First, I just want to welcome people to the podcast, the Unstuck Movement. Stories that help you break those chains that are holding you back in your life. We're sponsored by the Connected Leaders Academy. You can check out connectedleadersacademy.com. Over 450 entrepreneurs, servant leaders from all over the world who help each other grow. We'd love for you to be a part of that community. And also, if you're somebody who's the go-to authority in your field, you want to be known as the expert in what you do, you want to have a lasting impact on people's lives and build incredible connections for yourself, I encourage you to launch your own platform. You can do that starting your own podcast with our Pro Podcaster Academy. Join the waitlist at robzwentz.com. Christian Espinosa with us today is the founder and CEO of Blue Goat Cyber, a renowned cybersecurity expert and best-selling author. His work bridges technical expertise with emotional intelligence to inspire leadership and connection in all areas of life. And so I'm curious, just from the launch there at the beginning, what was the micro thing, or what were the micro things that were right in front of your face that needed tended to, that gave you this wake-up call?
Well, there were quite a few that I ignored and, paid the price for it. Uh, what solidified the topic of the book was a car accident that I witnessed where a truck T-boned a car. and we were right behind the truck, and the truck like was pushed back into my vehicle. And it was interesting because I was there with my girlfriend. She's my wife now, and she's a nurse. And we both got out of my car to help with the accident. There's a woman in the car that was the whole like front end of the car was like crumpled. So she got out and glasses falling off of her, and I don't know why she got out of the car so quickly. I think she was in shock, and it looked like her leg was broken, her arm was broken. Um, but what was interesting is the only thing she cared about in that moment was talking to her husband and letting him know she was okay. And nobody else got out of their car to help. So it was very interesting that my girlfriend at the time and I were the only people that got out to help. And the woman wanted to call her husband. She didn't have her phone, so she gave me the number. I called her husband on my phone and relayed the scenario, and then put her on the phone with her husband. But in that specific moment, like nothing else mattered to her, but letting her, kind of like your grandmother's story, letting her husband know she was okay. That's like all that mattered. Like everything else went away, and it was like it just struck me like we all get caught up in all these like dreams, these big things, but sometimes we lose sight of what's really important. And for me, life is about trying to have that balance, right? Because in the past, would get so hyper focused on the big goal. I have these blinders on and just let my relationship fail miserably in front of me because I was like so focused on this big thing. And then when I accomplished the big thing, I was like, on to the next big thing. It's like this endless cycle, and it
Yeah.
wasn't fulfilling.
Yeah, it's like it's like the old dangling carrot, right? It's like the carrot's out there and you chase the carrot, you get to it, and it's like, well, that didn't do it. What's next? Oh crap,
Yeah.
that didn't do it either. Um,
Yeah.
and so having that happen, because this just relaying this back to my own story that I had told, it's like, okay, that's a great revelation and super impactful, but you can forget about it a million times a day, right? It's like a million times throughout the day you forget, oh shoot, this is how I'm supposed to be living my life. So it calls, at least to me, for constant redirection. How did that moment and that realization start to, what did you start to like practically change in your life that started to redirect things?
Well, it solidified the topic of the book, and I believe writing a book should be transformational for the author as well as anybody that reads it. So the book was transformational for me, and it's a constant reminder. I've written a couple books. I've worked on two more, but if I write a book, I feel like I need to be congruent with what I'm referring to in the book. So it's a reminder for me to pay attention to those small moments. And
Mm.
that moment was fairly emotional for me because the woman that's literally all she cared about, and for me, I had to do a lot of reflection writing the book, and I realized because I was so hyper focused on that macro, the cost to me personally, which was failed relationships, um, and failed friendships, and a lot of like areas that weren't very easy to look at. When you pull back the curtain in my life. So yeah, it's something that goes through my head constantly because I have a tendency to get hyper focused on that big goal because I'm building a business and I have goals with that, but it's easy to get sucked into that and not pay attention to what's right in front of you.
Yeah, it's and also, most of the time, it's a nice escape too. Chasing the big goal is a nice escape from all the things that are falling apart, right?
Yes, that's a very good way of looking at it. I think I fall into that trap. I'm like, I can ignore all this other stuff, my relationship, my health, my wealth, because I'm focused on this dream, and that's all that matters. And I justify it to myself. But at the end of the day, those other things matter as much, if not more, than chasing this, made up dream you're after, right?
Yeah, and those things all kind of like compound in interest to make the dream a reality. Because that dream becoming a reality just by you sheer force of will making it happen is not going to mean nearly as much as like bringing people along with you, and the relationships you build through that. So it's really a great insight, and it's really something that, I mean, it's so hard to track it minute by minute throughout the day, you can lose sight of it so quickly. So you need these constant reminders in your life. And I know you talk a lot about emotional intelligence. Did emotional intelligence come into play after this accident? Is that something like you were already kind of practicing and implementing into your life, or something you started to implement after that? What does emotional intelligence mean to you?
That came into play with my first cybersecurity business. I realized that most of my problems in my company were because my staff lacked emotional intelligence. They're super highly rationally intelligent, high IQ, but low EQ. And I think this is a sort of a pandemic in high tech industries. So I worked to fix that in my first company because, you know, clients weren't happy, my team wasn't collaborating well because of that lack of emotional intelligence. So I worked to fix that in my first company. That's when I wrote my first book about. And through that journey, I've tried to develop my own emotional intelligence. Obviously, as a leader, I think it's important to lead by example. So I tried to develop my own emotional intelligence and improving that. And you know that all kind of come together with the accident as well in my second book, because I think for a while I sort of had this attitude like me against the world versus me in the world, and I had this like hard shell around me. And when you develop that emotional intelligence, at least for me, I had to like let that shell soften a little bit and be able to relate to people on a different level than I used to.
It's so important for a leader and somebody who's running the company, right? Because that hard shell, and this is true, man. I mean, that's the most managers and bosses. They feel like they have to have a hard shell to be the boss they need to be, when it's actually the opposite. And it's really can be very difficult to embrace that and put it into practice. What did that look like for you to become more emotionally intelligent? Uh, because that hard shell style is where most people get trapped. What did you have to change, like in your interactions, to make that happen?
Yeah, I kind of used to pride myself on having that hard shell, like nothing phases me, everything just bounces off of me, right? But I remember I did this YouTube video a long time ago talking about my grandfather when he died and my regrets about not holding his hand, not telling him I loved him. I just sort of stood back in shock while he's in the hospital bed and didn't say anything. And I started crying in the
Mm.
video, and I got like super positive response to that. And I was like, wow, this is the first time I've ever like kind of let that shell, move that shell away. And the response is very positive. And that was, something that is difficult for me, but it's also rewarding because I connected with other people in a different level than I was before. Because I think when you're trying to present yourself as you got it all figured out, uh, that barrier reduces the connection you have with other people.
Yeah, you're putting a block up, and you might not even be realizing that you're doing it. But the more vulnerable you are with people, the more they feel connection, right? And people, it's really somebody told me this one time. I forget who it was. It was on a podcast, but um, authenticity is a trait that people don't consciously usually pick up on, but you pick up on it unconsciously, right? So when somebody's
Mm.
authentic, you somehow know it without even having to identify it, and so you automatically want to connect with them more just because they're actually being who they really are. And if you don't know how to access it for yourself, then other people will not show that to you either. So learning how to do that for yourself, it like allows like the world to kind of open up to you in a completely different way. I'm curious, how did your business start to change as you started to become more emotionally intelligent? Did you notice things grow, or was there a period of it being more difficult? What was that like?
I felt like I became a better leader. My staff, my team seemed to, I guess, in a way, become more aligned with the vision and more sort of like connected uh, with each other. And it wasn't so much like this sterile environment. It was more like a connected team environment when I became more authentic, as you said, and more emotionally intelligent. And people were more open to communicating what they're feeling about work or about their problems they're having or about challenges. And yeah, it really helped my leadership and my company.
Were people confused at first in your life? Like, what's going on with Christian?
I don't think people were confused. I think people were like, finally, Christian's letting his shell down. he's like
Yeah.
he's removing that barrier, because I think I've lived the majority of my life with this wall up, and I finally have let it down. So I'm not as much as I probably can, but it's
Yeah, it's a
a
process.
process. Yeah.
Yeah, man, it's really interesting because when you start to figure out, like, okay, I need to act differently, and at least I'm speaking from personal experience, I felt very afraid, because you're like afraid of like being vulnerable, because you think people are going to make fun of you, or it's going to be weird, or people aren't going to accept it, right? So I felt like, oh man, if I act this new way and start to show up in this new way, it's going to be so jarring for me and other people that it's going to make everything super uncomfortable, and nobody's going to like it. But actually the opposite happens, where it's like people are like, oh, thank God you're actually being yourself,
Yeah.
whether they realize it or not. Like, something changes and it creates a whole new dynamic in your relationships.
Yeah, I think, like you said, people can unconsciously detect if you're being authentic or not. And before I used to try to articulate that I had everything figured out, but now I don't. It's like, if I don't have an answer, I just say, well, I don't know what to do. What do you think? And I'm just more open, which fosters more collaboration as well.
Absolutely, man. And I'm curious just about, because these two things don't usually go together: cybersecurity and emotional intelligence. It seems like those two things don't get talked about that much, right? It's like that blending those two worlds. How has that played into your cybersecurity business? I mean, clearly, because that's your bread and butter, and that's, I imagine, the goals that you were building towards, that you were talking about. How it kind of probably makes you stand out in what you do. Does it kind of change the way you do cybersecurity, and the way that you look at the entire industry?
Yeah, in my first company, like I said, most of my problems were because my staff didn't have the emotional intelligence. So once I trained my staff and we went through, many hours of training and incorporated that emotional intelligence, our revenue increased. Our clients weren't transactional; they were relationship based, and they wanted to work with us, continuously, and have annual contracts versus like a one time project.
Mm.
And my staff was more collaborative, so it really helped my business, my first business, and I was able to sell that one. And I'm building my second cybersecurity business now, and it separated us from our competition. A lot of our competition, and people even now tell us that they don't like working with our competition because they're very sterile and very transactional, and they talk over clients' heads because everyone wants to feel significant in cybersecurity. People feel significant by being, quote, smarter than other people, and that typically manifests by talking over somebody's head. But if you're talking over your client's head and trying to tell them how to fix something and they don't understand it, they're not going to be able to fix it. So it's like this weird scenario that doesn't make the client feel appreciated or understood, and doesn't help the industry move the industry forward. So I've noticed it's been a big discriminator for my company, and really helped us differentiate ourselves from a competition.
Yeah, I could see that totally being the case in the tech space, because sounding smart will, well, this is any industry, right? But sounding smart will actually it does more damage than good, does more harm than good. Trying to be
Yes.
super technical is because you know a lot about something that a lot of people don't know a lot about. You feel like you need to kind of show that off, but at the same time, that doesn't help you at all, or them. And so finding that people who can explain complicated things in the most simple way have the biggest impact.
Yes.
And that, I imagine, in the cybersecurity space, that's probably a difficult hurdle to overcome. How, like, I guess I'm curious if you have like a practical example of like, how do you explain it now, or how do you connect now compared to how you tried to relay information before? Like, what is it? How does it look different now, and just like a case by case scenario? I don't know if that's a clearly well asked question, but I'm just thinking, like, how does that look different now that how you're building these relationships differently than how it was before?
Yeah, I tell my team and work myself to put myself in the other person's shoes, like our client's shoes. If they're a doctor or a med tech innovator, try to put themselves in their shoes and understand like the lens they're looking at the situation through, and then articulate what we're saying through their lens, through the client's lens. And that's not always easy to do, but when you're able to do that, it really helps drive understanding. And I'm a proponent of neurolinguistic programming. And one of the presuppositions that is that the meaning of communication is the response you get. So if you're not getting the right response from somebody, like they're not understanding, they're just not getting it, that shifts the ownership back to you to change how you communicate in a way that they do understand. And I try to make sure my team understands, these concepts as well.
Yeah, that's a really good way of looking at it. Seeing things from their point of view will change how you communicate it instead of just giving them the information that you have from your vantage point. That's huge. And I'm sure that makes a gigantic difference. So we got to jump into the sponsor real quick and just shout them out for a minute. When we come back, though, I want to find out more about your secure methodology. So what is the secure methodology and how does it improve the cybersecurity team dynamics and what that means for your business and its clients? We'll talk about that in 60 seconds. Are you struggling to make consistent, valuable content for yourself? Do you want to have an efficient and effective way to create content that attracts the people that you want to connect with in life, the people you want to build relationships with in business? Do you want to be the go-to authority at what you do, at what you're great at? Would it be helpful for you if you had a platform that connects you to incredible people in your industry? The kind of platform that gets you leads and lands you clients without you having to beat down anybody's door or blow up anybody's inbox. Whether you're already creating content or you're desiring to start and it's something that's been kind of burning inside of you for a while, I urge you and encourage you to check out the Pro Podcaster Academy. Get started right now. Join the waitlist at robzwentz.com.
Hi, my name is Jose Escobar, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Connected Leaders Academy. We're a growing tribe, a community of entrepreneurs all over the world globally. If you're an entrepreneur and you're looking to grow personally and professionally, scale your influence, develop your skill sets, move the needle in your business, more clients, more money, more profit, the bottom line, and of course, grow your circle and your network like never before, join the Connected Leaders Academy today. Check me out on Instagram and on Facebook, the @ JAESCO25. We look forward to having you join us. Take care.
Loving this conversation, Christian. Great stuff. And I'm curious, what is the secure methodology that you talk about?
The secure methodology is 7 steps I came up with in my first book, the 7 things that really worked for my company to add that emotional intelligence to my already high IQ staff. And I call it the secure methodology because I think most of the issues we have in life stem from insecurities. So if you embrace these 7 steps, that should make you more secure with yourself. And I can go through the 7 steps real briefly if you'd like.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, yeah. The first step is awareness. I think everything starts with awareness, and it's not awareness of like everybody else. It's awareness of yourself. It's hard to make change if you're unaware. And in the book and in my 7 steps of secure methodology, I talk a lot about neurolinguistic programming. From an awareness perspective, we are very programmatic. We like to think we're unpredictable, but we have a stimulus, we automatically have a response. A stimulus could be somebody asking you a question, and then you start getting defensive, as an example. So this program just runs in our brain, and we are often unaware of it. So the idea is if our behavior is not serving us, we need to change the program. So we have a stimulus, we change the program that we run with that stimulus. So instead of maybe acting defensive when somebody asks me a question, I act curious instead. So I have to like stop that program and install a new program, which is new behavior. And over time, that new behavior becomes the dominant program that runs. So that's awareness perspective. There's a lot more detail in the book, obviously. The second step is a mindset. We want to have a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. A fixed mindset means we believe we're just hardwired, that we can't learn anything new. A growth mindset we believe that our brain is malleable, that we can learn new things. And if we tie that with the awareness perspective, we can learn a new behavior. Because in order to get more in life, we need to become more versus just chase more, which requires us to change our identity, which requires you to embrace a growth mindset. And the third step is acknowledgement. One of the things I realized as a leader is I was horrible at acknowledging my staff and horrible at acknowledging myself. I remember in 2005, I stood on the Ironman World Championship in Hawaii finish line, and I told myself someday I'd do that race. 10 years later, in 2015, I finished the race as a participant. And when I finished the race, we kind of talked about this a little bit with a macro goal. I was automatically thinking about the next big thing to accomplish. I never once took a second and said, you know what, this is pretty cool. I did something that took me 10 years to freaking do, and I never appreciated it. And I realized if I can't appreciate myself for doing something that took me 10 years to accomplish, I'm probably not doing a very good job appreciating my spouse, my friends, my staff, my team, etc. So I really had to focus on that. And the fourth step is communication. Communication is a big topic. We talked about NLP a little bit, and the presupposition that the meaning of communication is the response you get. And I think a lot of people forget that. They say, oh, that person's just stupid. They don't understand. They don't understand why we need a budget in cybersecurity. People always complain about the budget, but it's never articulated in terms of the recipient, the person receiving the message. So adapting that NLP presupposition shifts the communication or the ownership back to you to alter how you communicate in order for the person on the receiving end to understand what you're communicating with them. So I think that's extremely important. And the fifth step, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, no, I was going to say, absolutely. Go ahead.
The fifth step is monotasking. Monotasking is the antithesis of multitasking. Multitasking is trying to do everything all at once. And multitasking makes you very busy, but not very productive and very stressed out. You're always bouncing from one thing to another one. With monotasking, we have concentrated effort for maybe an hour at a time, focused effort on one thing, which makes you productive and not busy. The other thing with monotasking is if you're with somebody and you're monotasking, that means you're not thinking of something else. You're on your cell phone, you're present, which makes you a much better partner, spouse, friend, whatever, because you're present with somebody. And people appreciate when you're present. Like for me, if I'm telling a story or talking to someone, they're on their cell phone, I'm just going to check out and stop talking, and in our society today, it seems like that's what everybody does. I go to dinner a lot with my wife now, and, the couple sitting across the restaurant, both of them are on their cell phone. They're not even with each other. It's bizarre to me.
Yeah.
So the sixth step is empathy. I think in our society today, there's a lot of division. There's, Republican, Democrat, pro-vaccine, anti-vaccine, whatever division there is. And when you see fellow humans as separate from you, as a different faction, it's hard to be empathetic. For me, something that kind of drove this home was a couple years ago, I almost died from blood clots. I had 6 blood clots in my left leg. And, I'd done Ironman triathlon. I didn't think, someone like me would get blood clots, but I was pretty freaked out about it. The doctor told me I had these 6 blood clots and I asked him what it meant. And he said, it means you could die or have a stroke at any moment. I'm kind of freaking out. I'm there at the hospital by myself. So I started kind of silently crying, thinking, man, my life is over. Right. And he said something that I'll never forget. I think he was trying to be empathetic, but he said, kind of in a nonchalant way, he's like, oh, don't worry, I see this all the time. I immediately snapped out of my sobbing, kind of feeling sorry for myself state. I'm kind of WTF. I'm like, you know what? I don't see this all the time. This is a first for me, And I think he was trying to be empathetic, but he was looking at it from a doctor and a patient perspective versus a fellow human being. And when you see yourself as separate, it's hard to be empathetic. That was pretty devastating news I was given. If he would have looked at this I just gave a fellow human being some pretty devastating news, maybe I should be a little more compassionate or empathetic about it. And the 7th step is Kaizen. Kaizen is a Japanese word that means constant and never-ending improvement. So with anything in life, as long as we adopt the mindset that we are going to make missteps, but if we're constantly making minor improvements, we'll accomplish much more in several years than we think we will. Because a lot of people try something new and give up because they don't like immediately get results. And sometimes you have to unlearn something before you can make progress. And that philosophy of Kaizen is extremely important, especially when you're doing either the previous 6 steps or anything in life, really.
I love that. How do you spell Kaizen? I've never heard that word.
Kaizen.
I love that. Kaizen. That's really good. My dog's barking, by the way, if you can hear him. He wants to be a part of the podcast. So I'm curious. I've never heard, and that's so good, man. I've never heard the term monotasking. Nobody says that. Like everybody always says either people pride themselves on being a multitasker, or they, know you shouldn't be a multitasker, but nobody says monotasking. And that's so important, but also so the antithesis of our society, really, right? Everybody feels like they have to be multitasking, either because they want to get stuff done or they just have to because that's how things are. How do you get good at monotasking? Like how can you actually get good at that? Because I mean, right now we're talking, I have 3 screens in front of me. There's so much stuff going on, right? It doesn't need to be. How do you get good at monotasking?
So for me, I plan my day, and like I narrow it down to like the top 3 things I want to accomplish. And then I put blocks on my calendar that for, let's say, between 10 a.m. and 11 a.m., this is the thing I'm working on. And that means that's the only thing I work on. I don't answer my phone. I don't answer Slack messages. I don't answer WhatsApp. I just do that one thing. And I found that I'm much more productive when I do that one thing than, constantly balance between, a text message and an email, because that's all that context switching is very taxing on your brain, is very stressful, and it causes you to mix things up. Mm-hmm. So I just focus on one thing. It's called time blocking, and I put those blocks of time in my calendar. And then when I'm out to dinner with my wife or with somebody, I have to have boundaries. I say, if they're on their phone, I'm like, I say, we're here at dinner together to spend time together, not for you to spend time on Facebook on your phone and me to spend time on my phone. So let's put our phones away. So it's about setting the expectations as well from a presence perspective.
Yeah, it's intentionality, being intentional with what you're doing. And it's so true. If anybody's watching or listening and you have something that's been, maybe you have a to-do list, or there's something you've just been meaning to do for a while, but you haven't gotten started on it, it's because you're not sitting down and giving it your full attention for multiple hours. And it might just be 30 minutes a day, an hour a day, but it needs to have all of your attention. Because usually the big things in life we want to get to, the important things of life that we want to do, once the ball is rolling with them, it's not hard to keep the momentum, but it's getting the ball rolling. It's building that momentum, and that momentum is going to take concerted effort towards that one thing. And you've got to really focus in on it. And that's where the monotasking comes from. So I love that, because I think that everybody can do the things in life they want to do if they can really get themselves focused on that thing. And like you said, even this goes to goals, but just like relationships. If you're monotasking with your relationships and you're focusing just on the person who's in front of you, that relationship's going to get better. But if you're thinking about the 50 other things you got to do and the places you got to be, then forget it. Yeah. People can tell, whether or not they realize they can tell or not, they can tell.
Yeah, it all goes to intentionality you mentioned. I think setting the intention, like for me, I wrote about this in my second book. If I'm at dinner and I set the intention, if I'm at dinner with my spouse, I set the intention that we're going to have a great dinner, and that is the intention, that I'm not going to let, if the waiters, spill something or gets the order messed up, I'm not going to let that derail the evening. So it's also that intention. We have to have intention about what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. You mentioned about appreciation, and this is a huge thing too, because people don't know how to celebrate correctly, because we don't celebrate, right? We just blow past things once we do them. Yeah. And I had to really sit down with myself on this, because it's like, if you never celebrate good things that happen, then what's the point of even having good things happening? And how do you celebrate and appreciate stuff now? Like, what do you do when you have a big win? Is there a certain thing that you'll go do good for yourself to make sure it's a celebration of that, or what do you do?
I'm still a work in progress when it comes to celebrating. I'm always like, okay, I got this done. I need to get to the 10 times the goal next year. But I have made time this year or last year in 2024. I've never really celebrated my birthday for some reason. And a month ago, my birthday was on December 17th. I decided to celebrate my birthday. So I went to Dubai with my wife. I just got married a few months ago, and took a helicopter off the Burj Al Arab. I landed on the helipad there, and took the helicopter from there and did a tour and came back. And that was like something pretty epic for me. But I was like, man, this makes up for all the birthdays I didn't celebrate. So I decided to do something I've never done before, and it was a little bit scary because it was, fairly expensive and something like I'm not uncomfortable celebrating things like that, like birthday. But it was cool. I got off the helicopter. There's like a red carpet there on the top of the hotel, and all the staff's there, like, singing me happy birthday. So I was very uncomfortable, but it felt good as well because I've never done something like that. So I'm trying to make more of an effort to do these things. Yes.
That's cool, man. I love that. And that's interesting. Like, we think on our birthday, everybody has to celebrate us, and like you're waiting for somebody to celebrate you. Just go celebrate yourself. My wife does. My wife is so good at that. She'll schedule massages for herself on her birthday. She schedules like lunch with her friends. Like and I never saw anybody do that. I never was like, oh yeah, I could like just celebrate my own birthday and make it the most awesome day ever. Like, what a great idea.
Exactly.
And I actually, so I do this now for myself too. And like last night I gave 2 presentations yesterday, and simple way to celebrate. Like, I don't drink that often, but I was like, I'm going to go get a beer. So I went to the grocery store and grabbed a beer, and just like at the end of the day, I drank a beer, and that was like sitting back and just kind of like, man, I did a good job today. And it can be little things like that, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be like some monumental thing, but it's like sitting, like whenever, I don't know if you're like this, but when I cut my grass, I'll stare at my grass for a half an hour, right? It's like this stupid celebration of like something that you accomplished. And I thought about that one day. I'm like, wow, I celebrate when I cut the grass. So even just sitting down and reminiscing on how well the thing went is a great way to celebrate. Or getting yourself something nice, taking yourself to, Dubai, whatever it is. But you need to do those things. And I tell people this whenever I'm coaching them, and sometimes they think that's like really dumb. They're like, well, I don't want to do that. And I'm like, you might not want to, but trust me, when you do it, it feels good. I think every guy who cuts the grass stares at the grass afterwards. And I kind of use that analogy of like, I know you stare at the grass after you cut it. You don't just walk away and never look at it again. You kind of like marvel at it. Just apply that to other things.
I've lived in condos for the past like 15 years or so. So I haven't cut the grass in a long time, but I'm trying to think if I ever stared at the grass. I'm pretty sure I did, because it feels good. Like the grass is all cut, it looks nice. I'm pretty sure I did stare at the grass.
It's just something. It's something weird. It's like it's a weird celebration of like, wow, that grass looks so nice, and I did that. What an accomplishment!
Conquered the grass. Yeah.
Yeah. For at least this week. So good stuff, man. I love it. And I love just being intentional on applying these things into your life. You have to be intentional on applying them, because if you're not some people naturally have an acclamation towards doing this, but most high achievers, like you said, they're just blowing past this stuff onto the next thing. And it's really important. So I encourage anybody watching or listening, make sure you check out what Christian has to offer you. So you can buy his books on Amazon. Just go to Amazon, search Christian Espinosa. It's Espinosa. And those 2 books, The Smartest Person in the Room and The In-Between Life in the Micro. Do you have any other books on the horizon?
I've got 2 books. I'm almost done. One of them is on medical device cybersecurity, which is what my company does now. The other one is about the story we tell ourselves, and how that story is either holding you back or propelling you forward. And if it is holding you back, how to shift that story to one that is serving you versus holding you back.
Very cool. I love it, man. And I also encourage anybody who wants to launch their platform. You want to start a podcast that will help your personal life and your professional life. Check me out at robzwentz.com. You can join the Pro Podcaster Academy waitlist. Christian, anything you want to add to the audience before we sign off?
I think something to add is that we've been talking about that intentionality. I think we are capable of much more than we think we are if we show up with intention. We often get distracted and don't have that intention, but I think that intention can really make a difference in your life, especially combining that with the monotasking we spoke of.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I'll add to that. Don't let other people's uncomfortableness with intentionality deter you from being intentional, right? Because
Mhm.
oftentimes when you're intentional, some people in your life, it freaks them out and makes them feel weird. It's like, well, I need to be intentional, and that will also rub off on other people because they'll see the benefit of it. So I love that advice, man. Really good stuff. Thank you for being here today. Great to meet you. This is another incredible testimony of breakthrough. Until next time, this is the Unstuck movement.